January 1944. Eastern Front. Before dawn. The cold settle first. It creeps through it before it to skin, sipping into boat, into ammunition casing, into the narrow seam of a loosely wetted and pressed against frozen ice. Inside the tank destroyer, the air is stale, heavy with oil fume and condensation. Frost gather along the inner walls where breeze meets metal. Every surface is hard. Every surface is cold. The engine is silent. Only the faint ticking of contracting steel remains, echoing softly in the confined space. Outside, the landscape stretches in mute grey. Snow churned into mud, tree lines broken by artillery, the horizon indistinct beneath a pale, colorless sky. The vehicle does not move. It way, through a narrow gunsight slit, the world is reduced to fragments, shadow, distance that shift with the light. Somewhere beyond that time frame, engines are approaching. Not fast, not cautious, steady, a different sound follow. Deeper, continue, industrial. It rolls across the frozen ground long before the ship appears, an echo of something larger than the machine that listened for it. A rhythm note of precision, pure volume. Inside, there is no room to turn, no space to stand, only the gun, fixed forward, and the expectation of what must come into ATS sight. They had been told this machine would give them control. A hunter's position point a calculated advantage point a weapon designed to strike first, unseen. But here, in the stillness before contact, the distance between expectation and reality began too narrow. And somewhere beyond the horizon, carry alongside the sound of approaching armor, another presence moves with it, qui est ordinary, almost insignificant. A sealed metal ration teint. Une open point scarred point unaffected by the cold. It travelled with the advancing column. And long before the first shot is fired, it already tell a different story. The war had not begun this way. In September 1939, when German forces crossed into Poland, the doctrine of speed and concentration reshaped modern warfare. Armor moved not a isolated machine, but a coordinated instrument linked with their power, infantry, and communication in a way few armies had fully understood. What followed in the campaign through France and the Low Countries was not merely victory, but confirmation. Road filled with abandoned equipment. Defensive lines collapsed in days. Anti-formation dissolved under pressure that seemed both precise and unstoppable. Within this system, the early form of German tank destroyer, particularly the Sturmgeschütz 3, were not conceived as desperate tools. They were efficient ones. Low to the ground, easier to conceal, cheaper to produce than Tudor tank, and built around a single idea, deliver decisive firepower from a fixed forward position. Their role was not to harm, but to wear. Not to pursue, but to destroy. This doctrine assumed something critical, that the battlefield could be controlled. In this early campaign, that assertion held, engagements were often initiated under favorable conditions. Crews were trained to identify weak points, calculate distance, fire, and relocate. Report from the period describe engagement lasting minutes, some teams second. The enemy appeared, was engaged, and ceased to exist as threat. Ammunition was conserved. Fuel was available. Communication remained intact. The machine function intended. But even in this early success, limitations were already present. The absence of a rotating turret required the anti-vehicle to reposition for even minor adjustment in aim. Visibility remained narrow, dependent on optics that reduced battlefield to fragments. Survival depended not on armor alone, but on positioning. And positioning depended on terrain, timing, and coordination that could not always be guaranteed. These were manageable constraints when the front was free and the initiative remained German. They would become critical weakness when it was not. By June 1941, with the launch of Operation Barbarossa, the scale of the war expanded beyond previous experience. Distance increased beyond logistical certainty. Roads dissolved into tracks, then into mud. Supply lines stretched across hundreds of kilometers. What had been rapid advance began to slow, not from resistance alone, but from the environment itself. And the enemy adapted. The introduction of the T-34 altered the balance in way not immediately understood. ATS Loped armor deflected round that earlier target could not. ATS-wide tracks allowed movement where German vehicles struggled. It was not superior in every aspect, but it did not need to be. It existed in number that could not be easily reduced. For the cruise inside German tank destroyer, dismayant something sutel but significant. Engagement were no longer prédictable. The first shot no longer guaranteed the outcome. Report from the Eastern Front began to reflect this shift. Engagement distance shortened. Ammunition expenditure increased. Encounter became prolonged, incertain. Vehicles that had operated in coordinated formation found themselves isolated, responding to threats that appeared from multiple directions. At the same time, the logistical strain deepened. Fuel shortage became more frequent. Replacement par arrivée later not at all. Maintenance crews worked under conditions that degraded both equipment and time. The mechanical precision that defined early operations began to erode not suddenly, but steadily. Across the front, a different kind of sound emerged. Not the sharp, isolated engagement of early campaign, but a continued movement, column advancing not with precision, but with persistence. The war was no longer defined by maneuver alone. It was being shaped by production. Factories far from the front lines, particularly in the United States and Soviet interior, produced vehicles, ammunition, and supply at a scale that did not depend on immediate battlefield success. Loss could be replaced, equipment could be standardized, units could be reformed, and within those advancing systems, the small, sealed object appeared again. The ration tint, mass-produced, identical, reliable, it required no maintenance, no calculation, no favorable terrain. It simply existed in numbers sufficient for those who needed it. For German crews, the contrast was not ideological at first. It was practical. Their own supply situation, increasingly strained, forced adjustment in consumption, in movement, in expectation. Food became irregular. Fuel became ration. Decisions were no longer based solely on tactical advantage, but on what could be sustained. The battlefield, shaped by intention, began to impose ETS on term. And within the confined interior of vehicles designed for efficiency, the human experience began to change with it. What had once been a controlled environment, a machine serving a clear purpose, became something more restrictive. The same low profile that offered considerable limited visibility. The same fixed gun that ensured stability reduced flexibility. The same enclosed space that protected also confined. Time inside the vehicle lengthened. Waiting became more frequent. Uncertainty expanded. The doctrine had not yet collapsed, but it was no longer aligned with reality. It continued to emphasize precision, control, and calculated engagement. Yet the conditions under which those principles operated had shifted gradually, then decisively. And as 1942 turned into 1943, the scale of that shift became impossible to ignore. The war was no longer moving forward. It was pressing onward. By early 1943, the direction of the war had begun to settle into something far less fluid, far less forgiving. The German advance had reached the TS limit. What had once been measured in kilometer gain per there was now measured in position held, then lost, then briefly regained. The front no longer surged forward. It hardened, fractured, and expanded under pressure from multiple directions. Nowhere was this more evident than in the vast, contested of the Eastern Front, where the scale of conflict had exceeded the assumption of early doctrine. The battlefield widened, the distance between units stretched, and the density of opposing force increased. The introduction and mass deployment of Soviet armored formations centered around 34 and supported by heavy breakthrough using the cavalry began to impose a new kind of pressure. These were not isolated engagements. They were layered offensives, built on depth, redundancy, and persistence. A destroyer vehicle did not end on attack. It simply created space for the next one to advance. German tank destroyer crews, operating vehicles such as the Jacques 4, a compact etc., found themselves increasingly committed to defensive role. Their machines, designed for ambush and precision, were now expected to respond to continued movement across wide sectors. The battlefield no longer presented itself in controlled segments. It became simultaneous. Visibility diminished not because of terrain alone, but because threats multiplied. Reports from this period indicate a steady increase in engagement frequency. Crews described situations in which targets appeared from multiple directions within minutes. The absence of assurance on acceptable compromise now imposed a measurable delay. To reorient the gun required repositioning the entire vehicle. On stable ground, this was manageable. In mud, snow, or under fire, it became a liability. Mechanical strength followed. Engines operated beyond the intended cycle. Tracks were down faster than replacement could arrive. Spare parts, already limited, were priorities for rolling tank, leaving tank destroyer units to improvise repair under condition that reduced reliability fureté. Breakdown were no longer isolated incidents. They became expected interruptions. At the same time, the Western Front introduced a different kind of pressure. Following the Allied landing in Normandy in June 1944, German armored units faced the combined industrial output of United States and ATS allies. The American M4 Sherman did not match German vehicles in every technical category, but it did not operate alone. It arrived in formation supported by artillery, air power, and logistics that ensured continuity of movement. Where a German vehicle required careful positioning, the Sherman could rely on replacement. Where a German unit paused for fuel or repair, American column continued. The difference was not always visible at the moment of engagement. It became clear over time, through repetition, through attrition, through the gradual erosion of operational capacity. And again, within this advancing formation, the same small object appeared. The ration tank, standardized, sealed, distributed in quantity that reflected not just supply, but assurance. It moved with the troop, unaffected by terrain or tempo. It did not run out in the middle of operation. It did not depend on local conditions. It was part of a system that assumed continuation. For German crews, the contrast deepened. Field report and post-war testimony describe increasing irregularity in ration, particularly during the extended defensive operation. Supply convoy, targeted by air attack and constrained by fuel shortage, failed to maintain consistency. Crews adapted by reducing consumption, by sharing limited resources, by extending interval between resupply. Enjeu was not constant, but uncertainty was. This uncertainty extended beyond food. Ammunition stock fluctuated. Fuel level dictated not just movement, but engagement decision. A vehicle low on fuel could not reposition effectively. A limited supply of shell forced prioritization. Target had to be chosen carefully, sometimes under conditions where time did not allow it. The doctrine of calculated engagement began to erode under these constraints. Décisions were no longer based solely on tactical advantage, but on resource preservation. The machine, on son extension of strategic count, became dependent on diminishing input. Inside the vehicle, the environment remained unchanged in structure, but altered in experience. The confined space, the limited visibility, the constant proximity to ammunition and fuel, all of it intensified under prolonged exposure. Crews spent extended period waiting, listening, observing through narrow optic that reduced the battlefield to partial information. Fatigue accumulated. Not a sudden collapse, but a gradual reduction in clarity, in reaction time, in certainty. At the same time, the external threat environment evolved. Allied superiority, particularly over Western Europe, introduced a dimension that tank destroyers were not designed to counter. Aircraft could identify, track, and engage armored positions with increasing effectiveness. Conseil Alm, on sa reliable défense, became temporary. Movement attracted attention. Stillness invited detection. There was no stable condition. And within this shifting environment, the psychological framework that had supported early operations began to fracture. The expectation of control, the belief that positioning, training, and precision could shape outcome, encounter la reality defined by scale, repetition, and material superiority. The hunter's role remained in doctrine. But in practice, the distinction between hunter and target blurred. Crews continued to operate their vehicles at rand. They established ambush position. They calculated distance. They fired with precision when conditions allowed. But the outcome no longer aligned consistently with expectation. Success in one engagement did not prevent exposure in the next. A destroyer enemy vehicle did not reduce the volume of incoming threats. The battlefield absorbed individual victory without changing ATS overall direction. And this pattern repeated across forest, fields, and ruined towns. The transformation moved from structural to personal. The machine had not changed in design, but the experience of operating it had. Inside the U, the space does not change. It remains narrow, enclosed, measured in inch rather than movement. Steel plate rise on all sides, angled for protection, but yielding in every other respect. The gun dominates the interior, ETS breathcutting through the already limited space, dictating where each crew member can sit, turn, or eat. There is no standing position, no full extension of the body, only partial motion repeated, practiced, constraint. Over time, this becomes the first reality. Not the enemy, not the battlefield, but the environment itself. Crews assigned to vehicles such as the Sturmgeist 3 or Jacques Panzer 4 operated within a system designed for efficiency, not endurance. Early training emphasizes coordination, each movement timed, each role defined. The loader positioned shell within immediate reach. The gunner aligned optic with practice precision. The commandé observed through limited vision power, constructing a mental image of a battlefield from fragments. In controlled conditions, this worked. Under prolonged exposure, it accumulated strain. Air circulation remained minimal. Fume from the engine and the discharge of the main gun settled within the compartment before gradually dispersing. In winter, condensation froze along interior surface. In summer, it built rapidly, intensified by the metal structure and the constant presence of mechanical systems. The crew existed within a cycle of extreme cold and stiffened movement, that exhausted it. These conditions were not exceptional. They were continued. Reports from surviving crew members describe the gradual normalization of discomfort. The body adjusted to limited space. Movement became economical, reduced to necessity. Sleep, when possible, occurred in segments, often within or beside the vehicle. Full rest was rare. Equipment maintenance, observation duty, and readiness requirements extended beyond standard cycle. The distinction between operational time and rest time diminished, and within this environment, perception began to narrow. The gunner's view, restricted to optical sight, reduced the battlefield to a fixed frame. Distance, movement, and identification depended on interpretation. Dust, smoke, weather all interfered. The commandé, position d'Iguebusti contraint, relied on partial visibility through periscope or vision slit. Communication between crew members compensated for these limitations, but introduced delay, measure in seconds that could determine the outcome of engagement. The absence of a rotating turret amplified these constraints. A target moving beyond the limited arc of the gun required repositioning the entire vehicle. This action, simple in theory, depended on terrain, engine response, and external conditions. In stable environment, it could be executed quickly. In mud, snow, or under fire, it introduced hésitation. Hésitation carried conséquences. The tactical doctrine of ambush warfare relied on first engagement. Positioning concealed the vehicle. The gun aligned before detection. The shot, when fired, was expected to disable or destroy the target. If successful, the crew could relocate or remain concealed. But this sequence depended on control, and control, increasingly, was not guaranteed. As engagement multiplied and conditions deteriorated, the tactical environment shifted from planned action to reactive response. Crews found themselves engaging targets not from prepared position, but from necessity, responding to movements detected too late, to threats emerging from unexpected direction. In this moment, the limitation of a machine became immediate. The fixed gun could not track rapidly moving targets outside ETS arc. The vehicle's profile, while low, offered limited protection against flanking fire. Communication delay, even minimal, disrupted coordination. The sequence identify, aligne, fire compressed under pressure, reducing accuracy and increasing exposure. Mechanical factors compounded this challenge. Engines operating under strain responded unpredictably. Gear system, worn from extended use, resisted rapid change. Tracks, degraded by terrain and limited maintenance, reduced mobility. Each component function, but not always at the level required for immediate response. The machine remained operational, but ETS margin for error narrowed. Within this narrowing space, the human element adjusted. Training emphasizes discipline, measure response, controlled movement, adherence to procedure. Under sustained pressure, this principle encountered conditions that demanded adaptation. Decisions were made with incomplete information. Actions were taken without full confirmation. The distinction between calculated engagement and immediate reaction diminished. And through it all, the environment inside the vehicle remained constant. The confined space, the limited view, the proximity of ammunition, stacked along interior walls, each shell representing both capability and risk. Time passed not in hours, but in interval between engagement. Waiting resumed. The engine idled or remained silent. Outside, movement continued, often beyond visibility, often beyond prediction. And somewhere within that movement, carried forward by systems that did not pause, the sealed ration temps remained présent. Not à immediate concern, not à direct threat, but à key indicator of something the crews inside these vehicles could not influence. Continuity. Where their experience was defined by interruption mechanical, logistical, environmental, the advancing force maintained à différents rythmes. Supply followed movement. Replacement followed loss. The small, standardized object moved with that system, unaffected by the variable that constrained its opposition. Inside the tank destroyer, such consistency did not exist. Only the machine, only the crew, only the next engagement, approaching without certainty. Beyond the physical confines of a vehicle and the immediate demand of engagement, abroad des structures governed how these crews understood their role. It began with doctrine. German armored warfare had been built on clarity, defined objective, coordinated movement, and a belief that disciplined execution could impose order onto the battlefield. Within this system, tank destroyer units occupied a precise function. They were not expected to advance blindly or absorb sustained pressure. They were positioned as instruments of efficiency, deployed where needed, withdrawn when conditions shifted, preserved for decisive moments. But by 1943 and into 1944, that structure began to lose coherence. Command decision, on se basait on manœuvre and timing, increasingly responded to necessity. Defensive lines required reinforcement. Gap had to be filled quickly. Units were reassigned not according to specialization, but according to availability. Tank destroyer crews, trained for control ambush, found themselves committed to holding position under conditions for which neither doctrine nor equipment had been designed. Order became shorter. Time to prepare diminished. Positions were occupied with incomplete information about the terrain, the enemy, or a duration of engagement. The expectation of control central to early operation gave way to sustained exposure. Leadership at IG level recognized the imbalance. Reports circulated acknowledging the increasing weight of Allied production, the limitation in fuel and replacement vehicles, and the growing difficulty of maintaining operational consistency. Yet recognition did not translate into immediate change. The structural pressure of the war exceeded the capacity for adjustment. Doctrine remained. Reality diverged. For the crews inside vehicles like the Hetzer, this divergence was not theoretical. It manifested in daily operation. Position that should have been temporary became prolonged. Withdrawal, en sans option, became constrained by fuel shortage or encirclement risk. Reinforcement, when requested, often arrived late or in reduced strength. The chain of command continued to function, but its ability to shape outcome diminished. At the same time, the perspective from the opposing side revealed a different structure entirely. Allied armored force, particularly those fielding the M4 Sherman, operated within a system that emphasized continuity over perfection. Individual vehicles were not expected to dominate every engagement. Instead, they function a part of a larger framework supported by artillery coordination, aerial reconnaissance, and logistical networks that sustain movement regardless of immediate loss. From the viewpoint of German crews, this created a distinct contrast. Engagement did not end when an enemy vehicle was destroyed. They continued. Another vehicle would appear. Then another. Not always immediately, not always in the same direction, but with a consistency that altered perception. The battlefield no longer felt finite. It extended beyond the immediate engagement, connected to a system that replenished itself. This perception was reinforced not only by combat encounter, but by observation. Column of vehicles moving along distant road. Supply convoy maintaining steady progression. And within them, the same recurring details the sealed ration temps. Uniform in shape, unaffected by condition, present in number that suggested not abundance alone, but predictability. It moved through the battlefield a part of a system that assumed continuation, not interruption. For German crews, whose operations were increasingly shaped by scarcity, this contrast carried weight beyond material difference. It represented a shift in how the war was experienced, not a sequence of engagement, but an environment defined by unique continuity. This imbalance extended into the psychological domain. Early in the war, confidence had been reinforced by outcome. Engagement concluded in alignment with expectation. Training translated into success. The machine performed within anticipated parameters. Over time, as conditions changed, this alignment weakened. Success became conditional. Failure became more frequent, but less predictable. The cause was not always clear. Mechanical delay, terrain limitation, numerical disadvantage, or external factors such as air attack. The result, however, was consistent, the erosion of certainty. Crews adapted by focusing on immediate tasks. Observation, identification, fearing procedure, these remain within their control. Broad outcome did not. The distinction between what could be influenced and what could not became more pronounced. Morale, as recorded in letters and post-war accounts, did not collapse uniformly. It shifted. It became locally tied to the performance of the crew, the reliability of the vehicle, the conditions of the moment. Large strategic considerations rested, replaced by immediate survival and operational friction. Ideological framing, present in early stage, diminished in practical relevance. The demand of the environment mechanical, logistical, tactical occupied attention. The war was no longer interpreted primarily through purpose, but through experience. And experience, repeated under these conditions, reshaped perception. The tank destroyer, once viewed à contrôle d'instrument, became a fixed point within an unpredictable system. ETS strength remained low profile, effective gun, potential for concealment, but they no longer guaranteed outcome. They provided opportunity, not assurance. The enemy, once defined by vulnerability, became defined by persistence. Leadership, once associated with direction, became associated with continuity under constraint. And the battlefield itself ceased to be something that could be shaped. It became something that had to be endured. The transition was gradual, but definitive. By the time Allied force advanced across multiple fronts, supported by industrial systems that maintained momentum regardless of local loss, the role of German tank destroyer crews had fundamentally changed. They were no longer operating within a framework of calculated engagement. They were operating within a system under pressure, responding, adapting, and continuing within limits that narrowed over time. And as those limits approached their threshold, the conditions that had been building mechanical strength, tactical imbalance, psychological adjustment began to converge toward a decisive point. A moment where the distinction between expectation and reality would no longer hold. Juillet 1944, Point Normandie. The landscape is no longer open. Fields are enclosed by thick hedgerow, earth and root rising above ground level, forming natural barriers that restrict movement and fragment visibility. Road narrow into land bordered by dense vegetation. Distance compressed. Lines of sight shorten. Every approach is concealed until the final moment. For German tank destroyer crews, this terrain offers both opportunity and risk. Vehicles such as the Jacques Panzer 4 and the remaining Sturmschuss 3 units are positioned within this hedgerow, engine silent, l'anglais toward likely avenue of advance. Camouflage is applied carefully branch, netting, swale. The doctrine of ambush, refined in earlier campaign, found a final expression here. The conditions appear, at first, favorable. The narrow land force advancing units into predictable paths. The limited visibility reduces the advantage of numerical superiority. A well-positioned gun, firing at close range, can disable even heavily armored targets before they can respond. And for a moment, the sequence returns. Observation point alignement point fire. American column, advancing inland from the beach, encountered this concealed position with limited warning. The lead vehicles, often M4 Sherman tank, absorbed the initial impact. Engagement distance shrank to 10 of meter. The first shot, fired from concealed German position, achieves the effect their crews were trained to deliver. Vehicles halt. Smoke rises. The narrow land amplifies the disruption. For brief interval, the battlefield resembles the earlier doctrine controlled, precise, effective. But the moment does not hold. The response began almost immediately. American units, Trend to operate within a broader system, do not rely solely on the forward column. Communication, maintien through radio networks, relays the location of resistance. Supporting element infantry, artillery, and critically, air power are directed toward the point of contact. The edge row, 11 conseam, beacon reference. Artillery fire, adjusted rapidly, besoin to saturate the area. Explosion ter through végétation. Collapsing section of earth and exposing position that had remained hidden second before. The confined space they protected now restrict movement. Repositioning become difficult under continue fire. Above, the sound change. Aircraft approach. Fighter bomber, operating with increasing freedom over the battlefield, identify movement, smoke, or disrupted terrain. Their presence introduce a dimension that the tank destroyer cannot counter. The vehicle, designed for ground engagement, remain fixed, ATS gun oriented forward, ATS armor calculated against horizontal threats. From above, those calculations do not apply. Cruise respond à trend, engaging target with insight, attempting to relocate when possible. But the sequence is interrupted. Each movement risk detection. Each delay increase exposure. The narrow lane, once predictable avenue for the enemy, become constraint pass for withdrawal. And beyond the immediate engagement, the larger system continue to assert itself. American armored units do not see as advancing. When one column is halted, another adjusts ATS route. When vehicles are lost, replacement arrive. The pace of movement slow locally, but does not stop. Within these advancing formations, the same small object persists. The ration time, unaffected by the disruption of a single engagement, it continues forward a part of a logistical flow that absorbs without altering direction. It is not present at the point of impact. It exists behind it, sustaining the system that produces the impact. For German crews, these distinctions become increasingly clear. A successful ambush no longer alters the broad outcome. It delay, minute point hours, at most, then the pressure résumé. Report from Normandy describe engagement that repeat this pattern. Initial success followed by rapid contraction. Position that achieve tactical effectiveness are identified, targeted, and neutralized through combined arms. The time between engagement and response shorten à coordination improve. The battlefield accelerate. Decision compress into shorter interval. The opportunity to withdraw diminish. Fuel shortage limit relocation. Mechanical strain reduce reliability. Each factor, manageable in isolation, converge under continued pressure. Inside the vehicle, the environment remains unchanged. The confined space, the limited view, the gun, still forward-facing, still requiring alignment through movement. But outside, the conditions have shifted beyond the parameter for which a machine was designed. The hunter's position exists only for a moment. Then it is exposed. Then it is engaged. Then it must move or remain and absorb the consequence. In this sequence, repeated across the edge row of Normandy, the distinction between expectation and reality narrowed to a single point. The moment after the first shot, where success is measured not by destruction of the enemy, but by survival beyond the response. And as that response grows faster, heavier, and more coordinated, the margin for survival begins to disappear. The interval between action and response continued to shrink. By late July 1944, our operation intensified across Normandy, particularly in the period surrounding Operation Cobra, the battlefield undergo a decisive transformation. What had been a contested environment of ambush and contraction began to tilt irreversibly towards sustained breakthrough. The edge row, once a network of conseils, became fragmented under continued bombardment. Artillery concentration increase in density and duration. Aerial bombardment preceded ground movement with a consistency that removes the element of surprise. The terrain itself change, earth displaced, végétation destroyée, pathway widened by force à terre de navigation. For German tank destroyer crews, this shift eliminates the conditions upon which their role depended. Conseil become temporary. Positioning become visible. Waiting becomes exposure. Vehicles such as the Jacques 4 and the Light Hetzer are forced into engagement without the preparatory advantage of ambush. Instead of initiating contact, they respond to it, often under observation, often under fire. The sequence reverse. Detection preceded positioning. Fire follow movement, not planning. In this condition, the limitation of a machine become decisive. The fixed gun, effective in control alignement, struggle to track target that move unpredictably across within terrain. The absence of Artillery require full vehicle repositioning, which in turn exposes to observation and fire. Mechanical delay fraction of second under normal condition, extend under stress, compounded by worn component and unstable ground. The battlefield no longer allow for correction. Error, recoverable, become final. At the same time, Allied Armored Formation expand their operational depth. Units equipped with the M4 Sherman advance not in isolated lines, but in coordinated waves, supported by infantry clearing operation and artillery suppression. The destruction of a single vehicle no longer disrupts the formation. It is absorbed, bypassed, replaced. From within the German vehicles, this manifests a continuity of threat. Target APR in succession, not sequence. Engagement overlap. The gun, on suffit for isolated encounter, become a single point of response against multiple directions of movement. Accroupir. A target is hit. Another appear before repositioning is complete. The cycle compress. Inside the hull, the environment intensifies. The discharge of the main gun fills the compartment with it and fume. Shell casing accumulate in limited space, interfering with movement. Communication become more urgent, more compressed, more dépendant immediate interpretation. There is no time for extended observation. Only action. Then reaction. Then action again. External pressure compound this cycle. Artillery continue to fall, not always precisely, but with volume sufficient to disrupt positioning. Air attack, coordinated with ground advance, target movement. Any shift in position become a signal. The attempt to relocate, on a method of survival, become a moment of vulnerability. And la mobility decrease through fuel limitation, mechanical wear, hors terrain disruption, the option to disengage narrow. Some vehicles remain in position not by choice, but by constraint. Engagement become static. Survival become conditional on factor beyond control. In this moment, the distinction between machine and environment dissolve. The vehicle, designed to provide protection and offensive capability, become part of the terrain fixed, visible, subject to the same force acting upon it. Report from this phase describe increasing rate of vehicle loss not only through direct engagement, but through cumulative pressure. A near-miss damage tracks. A delayed repair expose the vehicle. A failed engine prevent withdrawal. Each event, minor in isolation, contribute to a sequence that lead to destruction or abandonment. The battlefield does not pause between these events. It continue, and within that continuation, the broader system maintain ETS rhythm. Behind the advancing lines, supply remain uninterrupted. Fuel, ammunition, and ration move forward in coordination with armored units. The same seal ration time persists within this flow unchanged, consist, indicative of a structure that absorbs disruption without altering function. For the crews facing this advance, the contrast reach ETS most acute form. Their operations are defined by interruption mechanical, tactical, environmental. The opposing force operate within continuity. This imbalance shapes the final stage of engagement. As German positions are identified and reduced, as vehicles are lost or rendered immobile, the remaining crews confront a narrowing set of outcomes. Continue engagement under diminishing conditions. Attend withdrawal through constraint route. Or abandon a vehicle when interruption remain viable. Each choice carry risk. None restores the initial advantage. The hunter's role, central to the design of the tank destroyer, no longer exists in practice. The battlefield HAS expanded beyond the conditions required for ETS execution. What remains is the machine, the crew, and the immediate necessity of response within an environment that no longer favors calculated action. By the end of July, the breakthrough is no longer theoretical. It is underway. German defensive cohésion besoin tout fragment under sustained pressure. Units become isolated. Communication dégradée. The capacity to coordinate across sectors diminish. What had been a structured defense transition into localized resistance. And within these isolated point fields, road, shattered edge road, the final engagement of many tank destroyer crews take place. Not a planned ambush, but a constraint, immediate confrontation with a system that continue to advance. August 1944. The breakout has already begun movement. What began in the hedgerow of Normandy now expand across open French countryside. Roads contested are now corridors of retreat or pursuit. Villages change control in hours. Defensive lines, on s'entendait to stabilize the front, collapse faster than they can be reinforced. For German armored formation, the structure that on cell doctrine together is dissolving in real time. Tank destroyer crews, operating vehicles such as the Sturmschütze 3 and remaining elements of the Japanese 4 units now function as a coordinated force and more isolated point of resistance. Communication between units is intermittent. Order arrive incomplete or not at all. The battlefield has exceeded the speed at which command can organise response. Engagement continu, but they are no longer par of a unified structure. They are fragments. The material consequence of sustained combat begin to accumulate visibly. Vehicles that ont supported within maintenance cycle now remain in the field far beyond intended operational limit. Tracks fail under prolonged stress. Engines overheat or break down without immediate repair capability. Ammunition resupply become irregular, forcing crews to ration fire or abandon damaged position. Recovery, on par of operational planning, is no longer guaranteed. A disabled vehicle is often a permanent loss. Report from this period, compiled from surviving record and post-war testimony, describe a steady increase in abandoned equipment across retreat route. Some vehicles are destroyed by air crews to prevent capture. Others are left immobile due to fuel exhaustion or irreparable mechanical damage. The distinction between combat loss and operational loss begin to blur. Both result in the same outcome: removal from the battlefield. Casualty figures reflect not only direct combat destruction, but also attrition through exhaustion of resources. Fuel shortage alone account for a significant proportion of vehicles lost during the final phase of the Western Front collapse. Without fuel, even functional machines become static, exposed, and eventually abandoned. At the same time, Allied advance continue with structural consistency. Units equipped with the M4 Sherman maintien opérationnel tempo through logistical intégration, that ensure replacement and repair capacity remain ahead of rolling loss. Vehicles are cycled through maintenance rated and removed permanently. Crews rotate when possible. The system prioritizes continuity of movement over preservation of individual units. This creates a pattern German crews increasingly recognize during retreat. Loss on one side result in replacement. Loss on the other result in absence. The difference is not always immediate in effect, but cumulative in consequence. Within advancing column, supply remain visible in ETS uniformity. The seal ration continue to circulate through units, un change in form, standardized in distribution. It does not represent abundance in isolation, but stability within a larger logistical framework. It moves forward with the same rhythm as the force it supports. For retreating German crews, this contrast is not abstract. It is observed repeatedly along road, through intercepted supply area, and during brief visual contact with advancing formation. The persistence of resupply on one side and ETS absence on the other become a defining feature of the late war experience. Inside the tank destroyer, the experience of a final mount is characterized less by engagement and more by movement under constraint. Withdrawal routes are congested. Bridges are destroyed to slow pursuit. Fuel availability, determinée, direction. Tactical decisions are increasingly replaced by necessity-based movement, where to go become depend not on optimal positioning, but on available pathway. The machine continue to function where possible. But ETS function is no longer linked to strategic initiative. It become reactive. Survival depend on avoiding engagement rather than initiating it. Yet avoidance is not always possible. Uncontested occur, often sudden, often at close range. In these moments, the original doctrine of ambush is no longer applicable. There is no time to establish position. No opportunity for preparation. Engagement is immediate, fragmented, and frequently decisive in favor of a side with superior coordination and support. The psychological dimension of this phase is documented in fragmented accounts from surviving crew members and Unirecord. Description emphasizes exhaustion, reduce operational clarity, and the constant pressure of uncertainty, where the next engagement may occur without warning and withdrawal option may not exist. The distinction between front line and rear area eroded. The battlefield expands to include retreat route, supply lines, and temporary position. Everything become contested space. By late summer 1944, German armored resistance in the West is no longer a continued defensive system. It is a series of isolated engagements occurring within a collapsing operational framework. Some crews continue to fight under order. Others do so under constraint. Many see as operation no true defeat in battle, but through the inability to continue movement. And as these conditions converge, the final phase of transformation becomes clear. The war is no longer defined by maneuver, doctrine, or even engagement. It is defined by depletion. The depletion becomes total. As the front collapsed further through late 1944 and into the final month of the war, the remaining German armored forces on the Western Front are no longer operating within any coherent offensive or defensive doctrine. They exist within shrinking pockets of resistance, surrounded by expanding Allied control zone, cut off from stable supply chain, and increasingly depend on local conditions rather than centralized command. Tank destroyer crews, still operating surviving vehicles such as the Hetzer and scattered remnants of the Sturmschiff 3, confront a battlefield that no longer behave a front line. It behave a continued occupation of space. Roads are monitored. Towns are secured. Movement is tracked and responded to with speed that eliminate conseils à reliable tactique. Even successful engagement no longer alter the trajectory of the war. A destroyer armored column does not halt the advance. It slows it briefly, then is replaced. This replacement is a defining characteristic of the opposing system. The M4 Sherman formation, supported by layer logistics, maintain operational continuity despite loss. Vehicles are rotated through maintenance cycle, repair, or substituted. The system absorbs attrition without structural failure. Behind this continuity lies a supply network that remains visible in ATS uniformity. The seal ration tend continue to appear across units, not a symbol in isolation, but a consist element of daily sustenance. It represents not excess, but predictability. Food arrive not a reward or a scarcity-driven allocation, but a scheduled function of logistics. It is present regardless of terrain, weather, or local combat conditions. For German crews, this contrast becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The absence of equivalent stability in their own supply system manifests across all operational dimensions. Fuel shortage restrict movement to short, calculated interval. Ammunition réservée dictate engagement frequency. Spare are become unavailable or delayed indefinitely. Vehicles that might otherwise remain operational are abandoned not due to destruction, but due to lack of resources required to keep them functional. Maintenance has to be a routine process and become improvisation. Repairs are conducted under fire, in temporary conditions, with incomplete tools or salvage components. Some vehicles are cannibalized to keep others running. Anti-units are reorganized around survivability rather than effectiveness. In these conditions, the concept of a tank destroyer are precise, controlled instrument of warfare loses meaning. The machine still exists. The gun still fear. The armor still provide protection within ATS limits. But the system that gave it purpose no longer function. Survival becomes the primary objective. Engagement becomes secondary. And withdrawal, when possible, becomes the dominant operational pattern. By early 1945, the Western Front is characterized by fragmentation. Large-scale coordinated defense is no longer present. Instead, small groups of vehicles and infantry operate in isolation, often in a war of adjacent friendly or enemy position until contact occurs. Engagements are brief, intense, and decisive. The side with greater mobility, communication, and supply integration consistently dictate the outcome. In many cases, German armored vehicles are immobilized before engagement even occurs, disabled by fuel exhaustion, mechanical failure, or lack of viable escape route. On stationary, they become vulnerable to artillery or air attack. The distinction between combat destruction and operational abandonment disappears almost entirely. What remains is a pattern of attrition that does not require decisive battles to complete. It progresses through accumulation, loss after loss, position after position, vehicle after vehicle. The symbolic contrast that HAS persisted through the conflict, the ration time moving consistently with advancing force, now become more pronounced in ATS implication. It is not simply a matter of material difference. It reflects a system capable of maintaining continuity across time, distance, and combat pressure. That continuity allows sustained advance. The absence of it prevents sustained defense. For the crews inside remaining tank destroyer, the war is no longer experienced a sequence of operation. It is experienced a gradual contraction of possibility. Movement become limited. Engagement become reactive. Survival become conditional on factor outside control. And eventually, even that condition fell too old. Vehicles are abandoned in increasing number, not always after destruction, but when continuation is no longer feasible. Crews evacuate, destroy equipment where possible, or surrender when resistance is no longer sustainable. The machine, en central to tactical identity, become a liability when it can no longer move, repair, or resupply. By the final month of the war in Europe, the operational identity of German tank destroyer units is fully dissolved. What remains are isolated crews, fragmented equipment, and the absence of a system that ons defined their role. The battlefield that ons demanded precision now demand endurance. And endurance, without supply, cannot be maintained. By the spring of 1945, the war in Europe no longer resembles the system that began it. The structure that ons defined movement, coordination, and tactical purpose have dissolved into fragmentation. What remains is not an organized front, but a succession of collapsed cities encircled, roads severed, units isolated until contact, then dissolved. For the remaining German tank destroyer crews, whether still operating the Sturmschiff 3 or abandoned remnant of the Japon Z4, the machine has become something fundamentally altered from its original purpose. It is no longer an instrument of controlled engagement. It is no longer a tool shaped by doctrine. It is simply a vessel moving through a landscape where control no longer exists. The war, at its end, is not decided in a single moment. It is decided in accumulation. In fuel that does not arrive point, et en ammunition that cannot be replaced point, et en repères that are no longer possible point, et en coordination that no longer reach its destination. Across from this fragmentation stand a system defined by continuity. The advance of Allied force, including armored units equipped with the M4 Sherman, is not dependent on a single point of success or failure. It is sustained by depth industrial, logistical, and organizational. Loss does not interrupt movement. It is absorbed, recorded, and replaced. And within that continuity, the small sealed ration est un remain présent. It is not remarkable on its own. It carry no strategic weight. But it represents something that shapes the anti-outcome of the war. Predictability within chaos. The assurance that movement, supply, and sustainment will continue regardless of local disruption. For German crews, the absence of that assurance defined their experience of the final years. Every operation became conditional. Every movement carried uncertainty not only about the enemy, but about fuel, repair, and return. The machine could still function, but only within narrowing constraints. And as those constraints tightened, the role of the tank destroyer collapsed into something unrecognizable from its origin. What had once been designed for precision strike from concealed became, at the end, a reactive presence within a collapsing system, responding rather than shaping, surviving rather than controlling, existing rather than influencing. The psychological transformation followed the material one. Early war confidence in doctrine gave way to adaptation under pressure. Adaptation gave way to endurance. Endurance gave way to exhaustion. By the final phase, many crews no longer measure success in tactical terms, but in continuation from one moment to the next. Not victory, not defeat, but survival through another hour. The battlefield, stripped of its early structure, became an environment defined by exhaustion of resources rather than decisive engagement. Even destruction of enemy vehicles no longer alters the larger trajectory of the war. The scale had shifted beyond the reach of individual action. And within that shift lies the central reality of the experience. The tank destroyer crews did not fail because their machines were ineffective in isolation. They failed because the system around them no longer supported the conditions required for those machines to succeed. Doctrine without supply became limitation. Tactique without continuity became reaction. Machine without logistics became static metal. In contrast, the opposing system maintained its rhythm. The presence of standardized ration, continued vehicle replacement, and coordinated movement was not merely a logistical detail. It was a foundation of operational reality. It allowed persistence where resistance fragmented. In the end, the war was not only a confrontation of weapon or tactique. It was a confrontation of system over time. And time, under unequal conditions, became decisive. When the last tank destroyer fell silent with their true destruction, abandonment, or surrender, their silence marked not a single defeat, but the completion of a long structural collapse. The machine remained where they stopped. The crews moved beyond them. And the war continued until there was no system left to sustain it. What remains historical memory is not only the steel and fire of those vehicles, but the quiet truth revealed inside them. That warfare is not only fought in the moment of engagement. It is decided in everything that makes engagement possible or impossible long before the first shot is ever fired.